And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show, broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wang's at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, yesterday, Governor Gavin Newsom was touting a new plan to put a bond on the ballot next year that would increase the amount of mental health and substance use treatment beds we have in the state of California. Here's what he had to say.
Look, there's no other issue, and I don't have to preach to any of you, that impacts more people in more ways on more days than the issue of behavioral health, the issue of mental health, brain health, and frankly, our incapacity as a nation to address this issue in a meaningful and substantive way. Of course, we're standing here, the Capitol behind me, very mindful of our history and the history we made in this space.
I can't remember where I read it, but I read somewhere over the weekend that to be compliant with everything that's currently required to run a bed in a mental institution, it costs somewhere between $450,000 and $500,000 per person.
It's absolutely maddening. And some of the regulations to make sure that we don't have loony bins like in the 40s and 50s, you can only have 16 patients per facility. How does that make any sense?
I don't know, but remind me the next time Geraldo comes on, we need to yell at him about that too. He was the one that exposed the mental institutions that pretty much started the dominoes.
And yes, they were bad, but what we have now is worse, because what we have now is they're languishing on the streets trying to stab us.
If you're out and about, be careful. The heat wave is here until, Tuesday of next week, Randy?
That's right, but don't you worry. Even though it's going to be incredibly hot and it's a chance that our grid will be taxed, Gavin Newsom has a plan so everyone can deal with the heat.
And that's why we put out yesterday a $20 million investment in a public activation campaign. And I say activation, it's not just an information campaign.
He's buying PSAs.
I see. Sunday, I ordered my brunch at a restaurant, and then the power went down at the restaurant. But fortunately, the bar was still operational, so no harm, no foul, no blood, no ambulance. 800-222-KABC is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is a pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the host of the Very Serious Podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And you can subscribe to his newsletter online at joshbarro.com and follow him on Twitter at J. Barro. Josh Barro, welcome.
Hey, John. Good to be talking with you.
Absolutely. Great to hear your voice. So Let's start out by talking about Gavin Newsom, because what do you think he's up to right now? In addition to going on all the national shows, he just put out, I don't know if you've seen this, but he just put out this 17-minute promotional video of himself where he's the narrator, and it's essentially him running around the state fist-bumping people, and it looks like it was produced by the Church of Scientology. Let's listen to a clip.
California. I love this state and all the parts that make us home. Here, freedom is a right for all, not a privilege for some. That freedom is why people come from all around the world, from every conceivable background and walk of life, for every possible reason, to realize the California dream.
Might want to work on the sound mixing, Gavin.
Yeah, it also included him at San Quentin State Prison throwing out the high fives like he's Hulk Hogan walking to the ring.
Doing an excellent job, man. I appreciate you. Thank you, man. Thank you, brother. We're all proud of you, man.
Nice, man.
Okay. He says he's not a candidate for the presidency, but you don't do any of these things, including try to put together a constitutional amendment where you build a national database of potential voters and donors unless you're running. Why do you think he's doing all of this while saying, I'm not running, I have no interest in the presidency, I'm not a candidate for office?
Well, I think he's hoping that Joe Biden will drop dead.
Oh, boy.
I mean, look, running for president, like becoming president, always has a strong element of being in the right place at the right time. In addition to all the other things that you do to be an appealing candidate. And so, I think the stuff that he's doing now, I think he'll run in 2028, but I think he also wants to be ready if for any reason the Democratic Party ends up needing a new candidate in 2024. Now, I don't think Joe Biden is going to step aside. I don't think he is likely to die. But you never know. And it's sort of, I think there's a similar element to why some of these Republicans are in this race with no strategy of how they're going to beat Donald Trump in a primary. They have no idea what might happen to Donald Trump, whether he might die or go to prison or, finally he'll do something that alienates the party from him. They just want to be there and be ready in case the party needs a presidential candidate. And I think that's what Gavin is doing.
I think you're probably right. Given that the White House has said publicly that they embrace Gavin Newsom and they want him to be one of their chief surrogates in the upcoming election. And I say to myself, this guy is just waiting for you to slip. This guy is waiting maybe to push you on that banana peel. Why in the world would you trust him?
Well, but that's all of politics, right? I mean, there's 100 members of the Senate. They all want to be president. I think, I don't think it's that unusual a situation to have people who are your political ally who, deep down what they really hope is that, that you will go away so that they can have power. So I think that it's an inherently awkward thing. I don't think it's that weird. What I think is weirder is I don't really understand who Gavin Newsom is supposed to be useful for activating. Democrats, they don't need to contest California, obviously. And he's always just struck me as kind of generic Democrat plus some really off-putting personality features with no particular idea that it's not like there's some constituency of the Democratic Party that especially loves Gavin Newsom. It's not like he's particularly loved by Black or Hispanic voters. I don't think there's any reason to think that he's especially useful for appealing to voters in the middle in the way that someone like Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro might be. And so it's not clear to me what his usefulness is as a surrogate, but I think from the Biden campaign's perspective, they'd rather have him inside the tent pissing out than outside the tent pissing in. And I think that's trying to make nice is a way that he will do less that creates these news stories about that, maybe there will be a different candidate in 2024. I think they have to be annoyed about the constitutional amendment thing, though, because the thing is when you raise the salience of gun politics, that's just good for Republican candidates. Republican voters are more activated around gun policy than Democratic voters are. The last thing you want is people talking about the idea that Democrats are going to amend the Constitution to make it easier to impose regulations on guns, especially because there's no way such an amendment to the Constitution is actually going to be imposed. So that's Gavin Newsom being very selfish. He's building himself a donor list that will be helpful if he runs for president, whether that's in 2024 or 2028. And he raises his profile with the sort of super core Democratic voters who are addicted to MSNBC. So it's good for Gavin, but it's bad for the party. And I think it's sort of transparent that he's harming the party in order to further his own interests.
Let's say Biden just writes this off as just the nature of the business. The people underneath you are ambitious, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. So you just have to keep an eye on them and live with it. What he's doing is really an act of war directed at Kamala Harris, because in theory, she's the next Democrat in line. They both come from California. A. Smith is the political strategist for both of them and has been since the beginning years of their political career. If you're Kamala Harris and you're seeing Gavin Newsom doing all of this, you have to say to yourself, whoa, buddy, you're out of line.
Well, I mean, I'm sure she wishes that the field would be cleared for her in the way that it essentially was for Al Gore in 2000. But the problem is that, Kamala Harris is a weak candidate, and she's widely perceived within the party as being a pretty weak politician. So it's, Newsom is doing the most brazen and high-profile stuff, but he's not the only person who's positioning himself already for 2028 or if there was a race this year. J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, has also been making certain national moves like that. I think that, in a 2028 campaign, I think you're likely to see a variety of other governors and senators try running. I think Shapiro in Pennsylvania is one who's fairly likely. I don't think that Democrats view Kamala as formidable, nor do they think that she's somehow entitled to be the next candidate. So I think it's likely that you will have a wide open nominating race in 2028, whether Joe Biden is reelected and retiring, or if there is a Republican president and they're running a challenger campaign.
We're speaking with Josh Barro, who's the host of the Very Serious Podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcasts, and follow him on Twitter at jbarrow. Kamala Harris, of course, has been a disappointment this term for the Biden administration, and it seems like a lot of their problem children have come from the state of California. Not just Kamala Harris, but Javier Becerra, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who was there through the COVID-19 pandemic and certainly wasn't a part of many of the big press conferences. A lot of negative stories written about his leadership at HHS. He certainly screwed up the monkeypox vaccine in the early days of that crisis. He's had a lot of problems. You had Eric Garcetti, who was their nominee to be the ambassador to India. That got held up for forever and a day, and he barely squeaked through in the dead of night. And now you have Julie Su, who is the nominee to be the Secretary of Labor, who was the California Secretary of Labor and in charge of our EDD system that got somewhere between $20 and $30 billion stolen from it. She says it wasn't her fault, that the computers were old, and you shouldn't blame her for that. And it's unclear at this point if she's going to have the votes to get through. Why do you think so many of their problem kids have come from here?
I don't know what it is about California specifically. I mean, one interesting thing with Becerra is that there was reporting that Nancy Pelosi tried to warn the administration off nominating Becerra. She had negative experiences with him when he was in the House of Representatives. So, you know, it's not like they weren't warned on that one. As for Julie Su, I mean,
by the way, she did.
Yeah.
He was part of the leadership team, and if I recall correctly, he was the one that got their donor computer system hacked into, and all of their donor information got spread all over the internet, and she viewed him as being unbelievably disloyal, and when she wanted to lobby against him, they wouldn't take her call, and she's furious over it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think that, and then the other reporting about that was that basically they had the governor of New Mexico was the first person they went to with the HHS job, and she had more relevant experience for healthcare, but she turned it down. And like Becerra, she's Hispanic, and then there was a lot of agita from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus that they weren't giving enough seats in the cabinet to Hispanics, and so they sort of panicked. And basically, Becerra is someone who had been on the list as a possible appointee for something, and they slotted him into that. It fixed their short-term political problem. But, you know, HHS is one of the most complicated portfolios in the cabinet. I think they've suffered from not having someone who is a true subject matter expert.
Absolutely. And I don't think Julie Su has the votes right now. And she's waiting on Tester, Manchin, and Sinema to weigh in on whether or not they're going to vote for her. But all of them have expressed all kinds of misgivings.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the reality of having only 51 seats in the Senate. Manchin and Tester are both up for re-election in 2024. It is good for them politically to show independence from the Biden administration and show places where they're standing up to the president. Sinema, you know, it's not clear to me exactly what Kirsten Sinema wants out of life, but now that she is officially an independent, she's not going to be the Democratic-backed nominee in Arizona in 2024. And so basically that gives her a certain amount of freedom to hold up whatever she wants. And we've seen this on some other nominees of the presidents also who have been farther to the left. I mean, for example, Sarah Bloom Raskin, who the president tried to put on the Federal Reserve Board. She had made some public comments about the idea that the Fed should expand its role to try to do climate policy. Joe Manchin, I think, very reasonably had objections to that, and the president was unable to get his own nominee for the Fed through a Democratic-controlled Senate also. So I think the Senate has been a check on the president in certain ways on that.
We actually just have some breaking news in the KABC regarding the nomination of Julie Su. For more on that, here's Randy Wang.
Manchin says no.
So that means she can only lose one more Democratic vote, and then Kamala would have to be the tie-breaking vote to get her through, assuming everyone's healthy and shows up to work. Now, Josh, I have a theory on why the problem children come from California, and that is this. In a one-party state where Republicans really have no relevancy in the state legislature, I guess in the congressional delegation they do with Kevin McCarthy, no statewide constitutional offices, the Democrats here just pretty much get whatever they want, and they have to negotiate with other Democrats. And because the fights aren't over politics, the fights are largely over personality, particularly in so many of these primary contests. A lot of the reporting that we get out of Sacramento is based on their biography. It's based on who they are. It's based on what their story is, that sort of thing, and not based on their competence in office and what they did and what they accomplished, those sorts of things. So you read these old profiles on Kamala Harris, or you read these old profiles on Javier Becerra. you're not going to find many of the warning flags that should have been there that would have been relevant to the Biden administration when they were reviewing the candidates.
Well, and then also they don't have the difficult political experience that candidates from more competitive states have, where they have to go out and actually win competitive elections. I mean, I think that's part of the problem with Kamala. That, you know, the last truly impressive election she won was when she was elected district attorney in San Francisco over an incumbent. The other competitive election she had was that 2010 race for attorney general. But a Democrat should not be in a competitive statewide race in California. That really sort of should have read as a sign of weakness for her. And then subsequent to that, she ran statewide against another Democrat for Senate. And so I think, you know, if Democrats are thinking about why is Kamala Harris a weak potential candidate for president, it's that she has never really had professionally to appeal to swing voters in order to win an election.
Josh Barro, host of the Very Serious Podcast, which you can download wherever you download your favorite podcasts. And you can subscribe to his newsletter at joshbarro.com. You can follow him on Twitter at jbarrow. Josh Barro, thanks so much for stopping by. A pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And if you want to go back and listen to the 12 o'clock hour, because you just dipped in now, Randy, that's easier to do.
That's right. Just go to KBC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. Now, if you don't know what a podcast is and you don't know how to use the internet,
Google it.
We have some breaking news about the AFTRA-SAG strike that was just voted on. They voted to strike in the affirmative. Hello. And we've heard now from the president of AFTRA-SAG, Fran Drescher.
Here we go, Nanny. Tell us what's up.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly. I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
She starts with that.
Was that done specifically for this show? Is she a listener?
I feel like Fran Drescher is going on the wall. It doesn't get more perfect than this drop.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
Okay, let's hear what she has to say.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly. How far apart we are on so many things. How they plead poverty, that they're losing money left and right when giving hundreds of millions of dollars to their CEOs. It is disgusting. Shame on them.
Wow, we got quite frankly, we got I cannot believe it, and we got a shame on them.
There's more.
They stand on the wrong side of history at this very moment. We stand in solidarity, in unprecedented unity. Our union and our sister unions and the unions around the world are standing by us, as well as other labor unions. Because at some point, the jig is up.
Okay, I take back everything I said. I love that she's the president of the union. She doesn't get this animated when she calls my voicemail asking me to vote on some stupid election. I'm here for this.
Because at some point, the jig is up. You cannot keep being dwindled and marginalized and disrespected and dishonored. The entire business model has been changed by streaming, digital, AI. This is a moment of history. That is a moment of truth.
Doesn't matter what the union is. If you're a union leader, you got to act like you're marching to war.
See, this is why we never get anything from the union. We have the nanny, and they have Cecily Myart Cruz over at UTLA.
And I want you to be all the way pissed off.
She does instill fear of everyone that opposes her.
Note the difference in tone.
Name.
If we don't stand tall right now,
5 weeks.
But she's getting there. Maybe she just needs some coaching.
we are all going to be in trouble. We are all going to be in jeopardy of being replaced by machines and big business who cares more about Wall Street than you and your family. Most of Americans don't have more than $500 in an emergency.
Oh, boy.
I hope she saved more than that from CBS.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
You know, she actually auditioned back in the 90s to be the spokesperson for I Can't Believe It's Not Butter.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
Oh, we must have been really good this week to deserve that.
I didn't even know that was coming. I didn't think that on the same day I would get a quite frankly from the CEO of Disney and a quite frankly from the president of SAG-AFTRA.
Well, you got labor and management on the same side.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
She's moving to the wall today. I got to get rid of somebody.
Not our guy from West Hollywood.
No.
Ooh, this doesn't look too good.
He's our favorite.
Not the women from Reseda.
I know.
No, they've earned permanent status on the wall.
Not the questions woman.
Questions? I'll be back. Get out.
And certainly not the cashier.
No, that one's staying forever.
If the cashier is dummy.
I'll find something.
But right now it's time to open up the KABC Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy.
Questions?
I know. I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
It's my favorite drop ever.
And surprise, surprise, today's edition takes us back to the mean streets of Oakland.
Some criminals like to break into an establishment with a hammer. Some like to use other weapons. Some like to use a brick. And some like to use their car. That's what happened in Oakland. And even though there was security around, the security didn't do anything to this stop. You ready?
I'm ready.
Here's KTVU, Fox 2.
Fruitvale neighborhood burglarized early this morning after intruders rammed an SUV into that business. KTVU crime reporter Henry.
I'm going to guess it was a stolen SUV.
That would be my guess, and now they've got a drive-through window.
KTVU crime reporter Henry Lee explains what the thieves were after.
Henry Lee's got more job security than you and me.
He's got more job security than someone represented by Cecily Meyer Cruz.
Surveillance video shows the Suburban or Tahoe ramming into Market 1 at Oakland's Fruitvale Village. There's a chain attached, and after the doors of the shop are forced open, the thieves run inside. They spent about 15 minutes rummaging inside. They tried to break open an ATM, but were unsuccessful.
I'll tell you right now, the thing that's going away is ATMs inside stores.
Oh, yes. That's just a big sign out front that says, please rob me.
They tried to break open an ATM, but were unsuccessful. They ended up stealing about 30 to 40 cartons of cigarettes worth $4,000, as well as a cash register.
What, are they looking for currency in prison? They're not going to prison. This is California.
When in doubt, grab the smokes. You can sell Lucy's on the street.
They ended up stealing about 30 to 40 cartons of cigarettes worth $4,000, as well as a cash register. It happened about 4:20 Wednesday morning at the market, just a stone's throw from the Fruitvale BART station. 2 carloads of young men drive up onto the plaza. They try to break into some nearby businesses before turning their attention back to the market.
So they're just going over this entire strip mall now.
Oh, it's just a buffet of theft.
The market's owner told me off camera he's frustrated because security guards were on the plaza but didn't intercept the intruders.
Okay, in their defense, what are you supposed to do? They're ramming through the wall in a car.
But once they got out of the car and they're trying to break open the ATM, you don't have a stick or a taser or something. What's the point of having security?
Well, didn't they have massive protests when a security guard at a Walgreens got into it with someone who was robbing the Walgreens? And because of the politics of the area, they sided with the protesters and not the security guard?
Yep, that was in neighboring San Francisco.
I can't even explain it, to be honest with you. I mean, I feel like even the authorities let them loose. There's no punishment. They were here for 17 minutes.
You could steal a lot of cigarettes in 17 minutes.
17 minutes? That's longer than a quarter in the NBA by 5.
And 17 minutes, nobody showed up.
He said security guards were on the plaza and saw everything go down but did not act.
We're paying for it for nothing.
Didn't the security guards try to call 911? Oh, wait, it's Oakland. 911 doesn't work.
Well, the owner of this store is certainly throwing the security guard under the bus, the same way the owner of the gas station in Long Beach threw the cashier under the bus.
If the cashier is dummy,
We're paying for the security, we're paying for a lot of things, and that's what we get in return. Nothing.
This guy sounds like he's done.
He sounds like he's all the way pissed off.
And I want you to be all the way pissed off.
We've invested in private security to try to minimize some of the tension that we've seen over the last few months.
Carly Ordaz is chief of staff for the Unity Council, which works to improve the quality of life in the Fruitvale. She says the council and not the merchants themselves pay for the guards at the cost of $55,000 a month.
That's a lot of money for guards that don't do anything.
$55,000 a month just flushed down the toilet.
What are we doing in radio? Let's go be useless security guards.
In Oakland?
Okay, maybe not.
Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, it is up to the police department to respond to these violent crimes. And we urge our tenants, our community partners to call 911.
Does she know what city she's in right now?
Isn't that one of the spots where they defunded the police?
And it's also a spot where 911 went down twice in the span of a week, and even when it's not down, the response times are atrocious. I believe they're longer than 17 minutes.
I love the fact that all of these people, whenever they're interviewed by the news, they explore every way of trying to prevent this from happening again other than voting differently.
Oh, that's not happening.
Oakland police are asking anyone with information or who recognizes these burglars to give them a call. In Oakland, Henry Lee, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
They're not getting a call.
No. How long does it take to replace a missing wall?
It's a little more difficult than a window.
At least if they break a window, you can get that repaired in a day. If they drive their car through the front of your business, that's going to be more of a problem.
That grocery store just turned into alfresco dining.
What's the weather like up there?
Muggy.
If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Greg writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com saying there was a hidden microphone that recorded part of what was going on in the final minutes of the SAG-AFTRA negotiations. And he actually gave us a recording of what it sounded like moments before the SAG-AFTRA board voted to go on strike. Would you like to hear it?
Let's hear it.
Oh my God, they melted the basketball court. Ooh, this doesn't look too good.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
No. I know.
That was quite a back and forth. There's a new poll that just dropped about the state's open U.S. Senate seat that'll be on the ballot in 2024. And Randy, one Katie Porter is in the lead.
That's right. According to the latest poll from the California Public Policy Institute, Katie Porter has 19%, a 3% lead over Adam Schiff at 16%.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.
Barbara Lee coming in third with 13%, Eric Early coming in fourth with 7%, and Don't Know coming in at 6%.
Oh, that Don't Know really could spring in the polls before too long.
But don't you forget, still, the runaway winner of this is I have no idea who any of these people are.
Well, a couple of things about this poll. First and foremost, this is the first time that Barbara Lee has polled in double digits. Every poll I've seen so far has shown Barbara Lee in single digits. So she's campaigning up and down the state. She's doing a lot of TV on MSNBC and liberal cable news. And clearly that's beginning to pay off because she's starting to see some traction. The other thing is that no one is really a runaway winner quite yet or a runaway favorite. They're all bunched together in the teens. Eric Early, the Republican who led the first poll I saw when he was the only Republican listed, is now running fourth pretty consistently, meaning if you read the names of all of the Republicans who qualify for the ballot, it probably keeps him out of the money. There's also an opening here for a Republican with a name that people know to really jump into the hunt. There are rumors swirling that former Dodger great Steve Garvey is exploring a run for the U.S. Senate. Garvey, of course, has almost complete universal name ID in both the L.A. and San Diego markets. They don't know him quite as well in the Central Valley and San Francisco, but if you're a sports fan in L.A., a sports fan in San Diego, you've certainly seen the name Garvey in the newspaper many times. Additionally, his ex-wife Cindy Garvey was a longtime news anchor and newswoman here in Los Angeles. So people know that name, and if you have three Democrats who are all bunched together, a bunch of Republicans that nobody knows, and one Republican who people do know, Steve Garvey could be finishing in the high teens, maybe even the 20s. If that were to happen, then it will be him and whichever Democrat finishes first. That Democrat would be a very heavy favorite in the November election. But what you could see is you could see Adam Schiff finishing out of the top two in the primary if a Republican gets in and Katie Porter continues to pull ahead of him.
It's very possible. Of course, I'd hate to think if Steve Garvey does make it to the runoff, the things the LA Times will say. Steve Garvey is the Dodger blue face of white supremacy.
Well, and if he pisses Katie Porter off enough, maybe she'll dump a pot of boiling potatoes on his head, too.
You don't want to piss her off.
No, you don't.
Has anybody bought her recipe book yet?
Well, we found out how much money she raised in the last fundraising quarter.
How'd she do?
She raised $3.2 million, far behind Adam Schiff, who raised $8.1 million, and Barbara Lee raised less than both of them. So it was a good fundraising cycle for Schiff, in part because he got censured by the House, and that put his name in the news. He was all over the place. But money doesn't always translate into votes, and as of now, he's finishing second in that race. And if Steve Garvey jumps in, my guess is that puts Adam Schiff in third place. And if he finishes out of the money in this race, he's going to be the angriest person alive. And if Katie Porter finishes out of the money, stay away from her and kitchen appliances. All right, we've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show. Don't you go anywhere. This is Talk Radio 790 KABC.
I cannot believe it, quite frankly.